All right, amazing. Welcome, everyone. We're excited to have you here. My name is Clara. I am the founder and CEO here at Talkbase. We see a bunch of you hopping on, so we're gonna give it another minute before we dive into the conversation. If you just hopped on, feel free to tune in, to use our chat. We're gonna be active in the chat today, so feel free to share any questions that you might have for our speakers. Yeah, before I hop into introducing our speakers, a quick introduction on today's event and what today's conversation is going to be about. I think that in 2025, we're all thinking about how we can make community part of our own organization in a way where it's valued, where we can see what community is contributing, what's the place of community in the organization where it belongs. And I think a big conversation I have seen in the last couple of weeks, not just in community in general, but in different resources and on LinkedIn, is again about community-led growth, community in go-to-market, community in sales, community in marketing. We kind of see it again and again because I think after last year's big hit in our market and layoffs and a lot of things happening in our industry, we see that now more than ever we want to tie community into a purpose, right? Within the organization, we want to make sure that it has its place, and I think go to market can be definitely one of the areas where that impact can be felt. So we're very excited to bring you today's conversation. We have three wonderful speakers here with us today, Lindsay, Blue, and Gareth. And I'm really excited to hear from all of them. And I'm gonna give them a chance to do a quick introduction so that you know who is on stage here with us. And we're gonna dive into a couple of things today. Our goal really will be to talk about how communities can drive growth and really improve customer acquisition. We're going to talk about how to better build those connections when it comes to cross collaboration between community teams and other teams focusing on go to market activities, whether that's marketing, product, or sales teams. And we're going to talk about how you can really align your community goals and activities with the broader go to market activities that the organization is doing. So, again, welcome to all three of our speakers. We're so happy to have you here. I would love to start with Blue. If you could give us a quick introduction, what brought you to community and what's your role these days?
Sure. Hey, friends, I'm Blue. I'm based in Chicago in the US. I've been in community now for the better part of 2 decades, which is insane to think. But just really fell in love with community and bringing people together. Just really found so much value in being the person that connected people and the memories that would be made and the friendships that are made. And fell in love with the industry from there. Started my career in nightlife, bringing people together through music, and then turned that into a job at Yelp, which I worked at Yelp for a really long time, bringing people through their love of local businesses and food. And now I'm at Canva. I work at Pexels, which is we were a startup acquired by Canva. So part of the greater Canva family, but still operating a little bit independently at Pexels, bringing together photographers. Taking a hyper-local approach, we have community managers in countries all around the world that are bringing photographers together at the country level by language, and then bringing people together offline through our meetups program so that they can actually create together. It's a little bit hard to take photos on a Zoom call, so we get people together offline and really focus on our offline program to create together. But yeah, ultimately, all three of those different verticals of community have all been just bringing people together and making some really awesome memories, and that's what I fell in love with and continue to fall in love with.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing and thank you for being here with us today. Lindsay, over to you.
Sure. My name's Lindsay. I sit in Boulder, Colorado, and you pronounce my last name Rhody, not like Rhode Island. Um, I, I community found me when I was in corporate with Lululemon, and I was a leader on the new store expansion team and growing the business at the new Lululemon stores through the community and the ambassadors there that believed in what Lululemon was and still is today. And so I also got a taste for being a founder with Lululemon because I owned a P&L and I managed stores, right? And so Somewhere at that intersection, I knew that I wanted to be a part of community and people and network and also support founders at the same time. And so my career, you can look at that on LinkedIn. I don't need to use it as a teleprompter, but has been now led me to the intersection of venture capital, community, and impact. And I led Sweater. Sweater is a retail VC fund. It allows anyone to invest into a venture capital fund. You don't have to be an accredited investor. And I led their community strategy and user-led growth strategy for 2 years. And since then, I've been consulting at that intersection I just mentioned. So really happy to be here. And with Blue and Gareth, I was just sharing before everyone hopped on that when I really started leaning into community as a strategy, Gareth was the first person that I followed on LinkedIn. And I've since shared his newsletter and content to various people. Some I believe are on this call. Micah, I see you. And so really excited to be here with both of them.
Amazing, and we're happy to have you. I see we have quite a few folks joining from Colorado today, which is super exciting. Thank you, Lindsay and Gareth. Over to you.
Yeah, great to be here with everybody. I'm based in London in the UK. Like Blue, been in community for around 20 years or so. So in the early 2000s, I was ran and helped community for a site called Habbo Hotel, which is one of the kind of first like avatar-based kind of chat sites kind of on the internet. And then that kind of gave me my kind of first glimpse at the kind of mixture of kind of community and business. And I've been in that kind of the intersection kind of ever since. So I've run communities. I've also kind of worked in growth and marketing and things like that. And so I've seen kind of like both sides of things as it were. Of late, last few years, I've been doing consulting, primarily working with kind of teams on community kind of go-to-market. And yeah, I've been running a newsletter called Community Inc. For the last year or so. But yeah, it's great to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for the introductions. And I love that Lindsay mentioned that you can also kind of look at more in-depth experience on LinkedIn, and you can do that for each of our speakers. I'm going to share their LinkedIn profiles at the end of today's session, as we always do with our events, so you can connect with them and follow the work they do, the content they share, etc., etc. As usual, we're recording today's session, so you have to hop off early. There is going to be a recording. We're going to do a quick recap in our community as well. Now let's dive in. I would love to start with the question, and Lindsay, I would love to start with you. If anyone kind of asked you a question, how would you best describe the difference between community and go-to-market? If we're, talking to someone who's never heard of both or either of those terms before.
Sure, that's a great question. If I'm looking over here, it's because I have notes over here. I'm not distracted. I just want to make sure. Go to market, to me, my personal definition is physically the action of bringing that product to market, right? So strategies like sales, like marketing, like positioning, like branding, like messaging. And community to me, a completely different silo, but informs all of those functions at the same time, is a sustained engagement with customers and the advocacy that lives within it. So it's very much about the long game. And I could talk about this for 10 more minutes, but community long game in terms of success and seeing impact on the product service that you're growing, and the go-to-market is really getting it out there to understand what the messaging is and positioning.
I'm glad we're starting off this way because I feel like sometimes, especially when we see companies kind of investing in community a bit later on and then kind of following examples of other companies, they think that community is like a channel that's gonna bring you, that's gonna be kind of the golden goose in the company, and that it does only this one thing, right? And that it does only a certain thing. So we really want to make sure that that's clear today, and we establish how those two can work together. Blue, if you were to kind of think about what is the difference between the two? What would you say between community and go to market?
Yeah, go to market is for me the overall strategy and all of the different departments that play a role in that, and community being one of the departments. I would venture to say the most important department, but maybe that's self-serving. It is, it plays a certain function within that go-to-market strategy, which aligns all of the other teams, whether it is sales, in our case, we also have a content team, so involving our content team into that, our curation teams, et cetera. But every function, every company will have different functions that are involved in that go-to-market strategy, but community plays a pivotal role of, actually having the ear, the hearts and minds of the customer and or the members, whatever the case might be, to really inform what is the best way to execute that strategy, for all of the other departments as well.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you mentioned that community can be a part of go-to-market, can be a part of that strategy. Gareth, over to you. Do you kind of see the difference? And do you feel like community is usually on go-to-market teams, or have you also seen community being kind of somewhere else in the organization?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen kind of I got a number of different kind of setups. Sometimes it can be within kind of product or maybe kind of DevRel, depending on the type of kind of organization. But primarily sitting kind of within marketing. But yeah, I mostly see kind of community as the kind of the glue to do go to market cohesively. So I see community as this cross-functional force multiplier, something that can level up the individual efforts of marketing, CS, kind of sales, by rallying your most kind of engaged prospects and customers around your kind of go-to-market efforts. And so, yeah, I kind of I agree with that kind of cohesive aspect
Yeah.
of community in GTM.
I love that you used the word glue because I think that's such a good metaphor for it. And I also agree with Blue that it is kind of like one of the most important teams in the organization. But we're a little biased here. But I would love to build on your answer, Garrett, and ask you a quick follow-up, which is, could you maybe help and kick us off with some examples of what this glue does? Like how can community collaborate with go-to-market? What are some kind of like the initial obvious ways for our listeners so that we can kind of tune in and know what type of activities we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah. I mean, this is probably an aspect I can kind of drone on for a very long time, but I think if you kind of step through the kind of different kind of functions who kind of work together as part of go-to-market, marketing, sales, CS, kind of product. Community can help level up kind of each one of those. So on marketing, for example, if you consider organizations like kind of Notion or Lego, they've been able to boost their kind of awareness and presence in the market through their kind of ambassador programs. So being kind of pretty lean teams. So in the early days of kind of Notion, they have had kind of 3 or 4 people on their community team. They were working with heads of individual kind of micro communities within the wider kind of Notion community, about 200 or so. And they collectively ran around 90 in-person meetups and online groups. And each of those people had their own audience, right? So that group of 3 or 4 community members on the team were able to collectively influence hundreds of thousands of people through this kind of decentralized kind of network effect of their ambassador network. Lego does a kind of a similar approach. So they work with their Lego ambassador network. Again, it's the kind of heads of about 350 individual kind of communities, and again, kind of collectively further their kind of reach through that mechanism. In sales, there's Figma, HashiCorp. They both impact high deal close rates and deal velocity by leveraging community programs, in particular champions programs. So they're kind of giving their most engaged prospects access to their staff, access to kind of resources that enable them to kind of move the purchase process through kind of internally. And they do that in kind of private communities where they're kind of bringing all these kind of collaborators together. And then on the CS side, those programs mostly focus around community source kind of content, educational materials, documentation, reviews, which kind of help boost product adoption and can reduce churn. So Atlassian, for example, found that folks who joined their community within the first couple of weeks are 2 to 3 times less likely to churn later down the line. Sephora has a kind of really interesting use of community in that respect, because they have their members kind of sharing product educational materials, which they leverage on their site to inform buyers, which to reduce the number of returns that they get for products as well. So yeah, a variety of kind of different examples and programs right across each of the kind of key go-to-market teams.
There are so many ways, honestly, community can work with other teams, and I think you covered quite a lot of them with great examples. So thank you for that. Blue, are there any other types of collaborations that maybe you have come across or that kind of come to mind that you would want to share with us as well?
Yeah, our team is in a very unique position where like Pexels is built around community. So we are the core of the product, which is a great place to be. I know that's not the case for a lot of other places where community could play a secondary role, or you're always trying to prove the ROI or whatever it is. But for us, it is built around the product, which is phenomenal. Um, two examples of what we do at Pexels. I'll probably talk a little bit more about just our go-to-market strategy for launching a new community, right? That in itself becomes a go-to-market strategy. We've taken a localized approach to our communities. In the last few years, we've been launching country by country, sometimes in regions, and activating those communities with a campaign, getting the community off the ground. We really leverage our current members that are there, right? So really leaning into our current members and using them as the amplifiers, the megaphones to get the word out, instead of hiring influencers or doing ads that we don't know if they're going to resonate. We actually have humans that love the product, love the community, love the experience that they've had, and they can speak very authentically and honestly about it. That is the best marketing. And luckily we've had core users in all of these countries that we've launched that have helped us speed up that launch in all of these places. On the flip side, whenever we're launching a new feature for the global community, whether it's new profiles or filters or any new features that we're launching, we work with our heroes. Those are our super users. We call them heroes. We work with them through the entire process so that they can influence on what we're building, how we're building it. They test it first. Everything that we do, I try to look at it of a lens of like, how are we adding values to the members? For a lot of them, just having that peek behind the curtain tends to be a huge value, right? They're first, they get to see it, they get to give their input, they're a lot more invested in the product because they've helped build it, right? So we really lean on our heroes to give us advice, test stuff. Our product managers are always jumping on Zoom interviews and watching them use the product, getting that feedback in real time before it's released to the entire community. And that's been really successful for us to launch the best possible product, is to actually talk to our users, get that feedback from them, and then ship it to the rest of the community.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. Lindsay, are there any other examples or maybe kind of, examples from your experience that you could share with us on what that collaboration could look like for inspiration for our audience?
Sure. Blue, I love that you mentioned the fact that the new market strategy is a community strategy in and of itself. I've seen it be forgotten that that is a community, and the same feedback loops and iteration needs to be applied there as it does with the user-led growth strategy and community that you had from the start. So I love that you mentioned it that way. An example I'll use maybe for those in the group that are really early stage go to market, and it's relevant for me today because this is a project I'm working on, is I'm supporting a founder right now that is launching a fractional car ownership community. And he also wants to have the product be user-led growth. And so there's two components of the community there. And it's very much a scratch his own itch, like lifestyle business, like been a founder before, on to the next thing, and like that stage of his life. And I'm like, how do we even know that people want this? And he said, well, I've talked to 20 of them. They're my friends. And I'm like, great. They're afraid to say no to you. And so let's go beyond that. And so he's a lover of cars. And so I encouraged him to go into the communities of car enthusiasts that already exist and to start talking about it. And he got out there and got enough of a response that it then took us to the next step of, okay, let's create this waiting list. Let's start building this audience, because before you have a community, there's an audience. That's a point I want to make too. There's actually different stages of community and how you can lean into them. And let's build this audience of car enthusiasts as big as we can. And then it de-risks your go-to-market launch, because you already have people there that are already interested, and you know that they're interested. So it's now, we now have a goal to get that list to 500 people, which I think we're going to be able to do pretty quickly. And we're building in public. And then it's with a really, really strong founder-led vision. You can tap into that community to help direct where you go, but definitely not letting those 500 people make decisions for you. That founder-led vision really still needs to be strong. And so a lot of nuance there, but that's an example I'm working on right now. And we don't have a sales content marketing team to look to. It's the founder and myself and one other very fractional person. So just an example I thought I'd share.
And I'm so glad you shared that one, because I think it can be, I think it's so great that right now we already have real use cases and analysis and numbers behind community, and we can see how it's helping with churn and how it's helping with new customer acquisition. And we also want to know how to get there, right? So I think what I would love to do now is spend a little bit more time on when you aren't collaborating with go-to-market teams, right? How can you actually get that collaboration started? And what does that look like before you become as successful and are able to get those great numbers, right? And are able to really lean and rely on your community when it comes to go-to-market and vice versa. I think kind of getting there and building that is another whole thing. Blue, I would love to ask you, what are, when imagine talking to a community builder and they were to ask, I would love to start collaborating with our go-to-market teams. Who should I talk to first? Should I talk to marketing? Should I talk to sales? There's even like a go-to-market leader in our organization? Like, how do I kick this process off? We've been in a silo as a community team, and we want to do the way, things the way you do them. What would you recommend?
Yeah, silos really resonates. We're a fully remote team, so I love remote work. I will never go back to an office, but there are also very big challenges. You don't have the rapport, the relationships, the constant, just chatting about stuff. So living in silos is very real, and I think ultimately everything that we've done that has been successful, it starts with alignment. So getting whoever the stakeholders are, whoever the leads are, whoever's going to be working on a project that you want to work with on a project, making sure everybody's aligned on the goal, right? Like, what is the end goal that we all want to reach here? And starting at the finish line and then working yourself backwards to then say, okay, here's the part that you play, here's the part that you play, here's the part that you play, and letting people speak up on where they can lend their expertise or, give their knowledge. I don't know anything about lifecycle marketing, but Nick on our team is a genius. He can come up with ideas and drip campaigns and all sorts of things that I would never be able to think of. So I think alignment is such a buzzword. It's been thrown around a lot of pexels most recently on just aligning the entire company on certain goals. We have a lot of different departments that play a lot of different functions and all have different goals as well. But really aligning everybody towards that one goal has been really successful for us to get everybody moving in the right direction.
Starting with alignment, I think that's so important. And I think you can actually, if community has been in a silo previously, you can actually start with something as simple as just introducing the community, right, to the rest of the organization. Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the word, because I think alignment has been it is a bit of a buzzword. It's kind of I think it's kind of the new synergy from what I've heard. However, I think it's really important, because
Only if
if
you
you're not
close the loop.
aligned,
You have to close the loop as
yeah,
well, right? Yeah.
close the loop. But I think it's important, right? Because then you know that you can really make that connection. Absolutely. Lindsay, what would you recommend to someone who is again working on their own, building their community? They're a team of one, even a team of five, and they all of a sudden want to really start collaborating with go-to-market teams and make that work.
Sure. Blue covered it really well. I think the only thing that I would add, and maybe this is there's a question for this later in our conversation, but it's also applicable here, is just community, as we all know, is a tough attribution. And there's always a lot of questions surrounding that impact to what you're building, right? And so I don't want to ever say that I am playing mind games with anyone, but I always start with the goals of the function first. Because if you think about, we want to get to, for example, 500 people on this wait list first. Great. How do we lean into community and the audience we already have to get there? So if you think about the funnel, and Clara, I'm happy to, I have a visual for this to share this in follow up to the
Amazing.
workshop. But if you think about the funnel and the top of it, community can impact literally every stage of that. But you can't tackle the community all at once on everything that you're trying to understand or fix or improve or iterate on. And so it's a little bit of a slow game to have peace of mind that you're building the right thing. And as a founder, being able to sleep at night because you're building for what your customers want, not for what you assume that they want. So top of the funnel, hey, customers, audience, what got you here? Great, we'll message it that way. Middle of the funnel, struggling to convert, hey, customers, what made you like kind of hesitate to convert? Oh, that's what it was. It was that little tiny tab that we included there that was so confusing. Great, let's change that. And then post funnel, onboarding, you're not seeing as much engagement after the person has downloaded the app, the product, the service that you were expecting. Ask your now community members or customers why that is, or survey the ones that did purchase the product and understand where the triggers are. And also, interviews are one thing, surveys are one thing. Interviews are the best way for you to get answers on iteration. And sometimes I even take that interview beyond just a conversation, and I literally have them share their screen in front of me and I have them walk me through exactly their process, because I'm taking notes, because a lot of times they talk about what they're doing inside of the thing, but what they're actually clicking on is different. That mind to like technology connection is interesting, and there's nuance there too. So don't overload your members or your community with answers that you need. It's definitely a slow game. Prioritize, bucket, and keep the KPIs in mind of what the milestone you're trying to get to next.
Absolutely. I think being aligned, as well as you mentioned, taking things step by step and choosing like which part of that go-to-market funnel you want to tackle, is super important. Like knowing really, and I think that comes from talking to the go-to-market team, right? And understanding like what is the priority we can help with and how we can, what we can focus on. And if you do have a visual, we would love to include it in the follow-up, and we can share it with our listeners as well. And Gareth, as we mentioned the word alignment, and I would love to hear from you. What is kind of that like one like essential first step community folks and managers and builders should take to align their goals with go-to-market priorities? Like, what's the first thing you think they should do?
Yeah. So actually, not dissimilar to Lindsay's approach. One of the first thing I always kind of work with teams on is a mapping exercise. So outlining the kind of customer kind of journey, right from kind of awareness through to kind of purchase, and then eventually hoping ending in advocacy. And if you start first with the kind of the outcomes that you want your program to get based on the conversations and the understandings you've had of the kind of goals and problems from the individual kind of heads of those different kind of teams, you can map that alongside those stages. So, awareness, trial, purchase, onboarding, retention. And then you start to kind of see the biggest kind of opportunities and the priorities of where community can assist and kind of help those teams kind of to resolve those the issues that they're seeing. So that'll be through things like project education, inspiration, could be support or skills development, whatever it is. You'll start to kind of understand what the best kind of programs and activities should really be. And what I like about taking this approach is it kind of shows the holistic impact that community can have, but it then makes you kind of laser focused on the exact problems and outcomes that you're kind of driving. And so I find that as a kind of a first step to doing it. That exercise is kind of really useful.
I love that. I think just mapping things out and knowing where you are, and I think that's where 90% of the initial hard work happens, right? Like taking the step, taking the initiative, introducing the community to the organization, and making sure you understand go-to-market goals, right? Talking to each team lead, each team member. Then step two is mapping out the journey, mapping out like what does the customer journey look like? Where do we both kind of intertwine, and then aligning those goals, how can we build together? I think the three of you covered it absolutely perfectly. So thank you. I would love to chat a little bit about challenges, and Gareth, I would love to ask you, what are some of the common challenges you've seen or experienced where there are like misaligned priorities or really unclear expectations between community and go-to-market teams, and what can that look like?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest one is just a lack of understanding of, I guess, how community ultimately kind of benefits kind of an organization. Oftentimes, you'll see in sales and or marketing, almost this kind of like direct relationship, particularly in like performance marketing, where you put kind of X number of dollars into this particular campaign, and you get kind of Y kind of outcome out. The that doesn't kind of happen. You don't have that same direct connection in community. Almost the business outcomes are kind of a second order effect of a thriving community. So you have to have the community kind of tick along and being healthy, but that doesn't necessarily, it's not going to directly lead to increased revenue or increased kind of leads and things like that. And so just having the educating those kind of individual teams on how that relationship kind of works, I think is important, and is kind of one of the kind of key stresses, I guess, on that relationship, and is kind of an ongoing kind of thing that you need to do to get around that kind of issue. Is an ongoing kind of challenge. I don't think it kind of really ever kind of stops, but community kind of roadshow or regular kind of check-ins with teams, I think, is a useful thing. So either like attending their own team meetings and kind of sync stand up, so you know intimately kind of the issues that they're dealing with on a day-to-day kind of basis, or at least kind of checking in on a regular kind of basis, so that you're you understand the goals that they are, where you're at, and how those things are changing. And then you can then use that opportunity as well to explain like how you're providing value kind of to them. And I think that's best done when you can tailor your message to that individual team's kind of end goals. So in the case of, kind of marketing, it might be kind of increasing, qualified leads. For sales, it's going to be, deal kind of close rates and kind of velocity. For CS, it's going to be kind of upsell, cross sell, reduce churn, that kind of thing. But making sure that you're phrasing your kind of impact in terms that they kind of care about and the metrics that they're being kind of judged against.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're communicating your community's benefits and how it can work, how they, you can collaborate as a community builder with a certain team and you're not speaking their language, I think that can lead to a misalignment, and also maybe them even not understanding and not, looking for other ways because they may think like that's the only way we can collaborate. Blue, how have you tackled this in the past, when there was a misunderstanding with the go-to-market team or like misaligned expectations? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I think the times that we've had misalignment is we're still a fairly scrappy team for the size of our ambitious goals and the things we want to accomplish. We're still kind of operating like a startup, so we are a scrappy team. So I think resourcing is the first thing that comes to mind. Is who are the people involved? What is each one of those people responsible for? And then also from there, then you start going into priorities and different priorities from each team. Everybody has different priorities, and I think what really helped us is to finally set the priorities in a way that everybody understands. What is the number one priority? What is a P0, P1, P2? Who's responsible for each one of those? And then how is every team playing a role in each one of those? All hands on deck for P0s. that takes priority. Everything else gets trumped. Everything else gets pushed to the side. And that's really helped us. It sounds very basic and simple, but it's extremely difficult to do when you have a lot of plates that are spinning, and you want to keep all those plates. Everybody wants to justify for the things that they think are the most important. Um, but that really helped us. And then from there, then we mapped everything out, and planning is the key to alignment. So we planned out our entire year with all of our programming, all of our launches, everything that's coming out. Obviously, things shift and change as undoubtedly obstacles and different things pop up, but having that really clear roadmap of exactly where we're going to be at in 6 months, or hope to be at in 6 months, has really helped just to align everybody and make sure that there aren't conflicts and resourcing issues, that people are being pulled into other projects, and has allowed us to make every launch a little bit more successful than maybe when we were just by the seat of our pants last year or previous years.
Absolutely. I think that as in community, we always have 1,000 ideas, 1,000 programs we'd love to build, and there is always limited time. Same goes for aligning and collaboration, right? You have to tackle, as we see in the chat, the most urgent or like the most important pressing tasks. And I think if you are starting to collaborate with the go-to-market team for the first time, you may want to show them all the things that you can do together. But I think choosing that like one initial program, KPI, goal, common path is a good start. So I'm glad you mentioned that, and I feel like if we keep that in mind and are humble about the initial task that we choose, then we can build on that success story and collaborate even more. Yeah, Lindsay, what have you seen in your community role, working with your customers, kind of a misaligned priority, common challenges that usually these two teams kind of clash upon?
Hmm. In more established teams, I'll go there this time. I've seen community leaders struggle to advocate for themselves. Community builds from my perspective, unlike go-to-market teams, which is speed and revenue and like, let's make this happen. Community teams build for engagement and trust. And so I think by default, the person oftentimes leading that effort is empathetic and maybe struggles to tie their work to talk about how they tie their work to the impact. And so I always try to just advise them on making sure that they know how to do that. So if lifetime value of the customer is a goal and that's important to the team, take the lifetime value of an engaged customer versus a non-customer, a non-member, and apply that to their goals, because that's something that's very trackable and attainable that they can look at and see. I always encourage community teams to showcase their quick wins. It's very easy to map who shows up to a workshop or a webinar or a panel, and then who from that panel joins joins as a customer or as part of the community. And so and what that percentage is, 20% of attendees, what have you. And so really, because so much about a community strategy is how you make people feel, which is hard to measure. But there are ways that you can advocate for the work that you're doing and the impact that you're having. And sometimes it's just not super clear on how to message that. And so I try to really point out how they can cherry pick that information, which is helpful when other functions within the company have their own KPIs and they can apply it more easily there.
I'm so glad that you mentioned messaging, because I think that's something that maybe we weren't as used to as community builders previously, before we really start collaborating with go-to-market teams and are working with teams that are really used to working with numbers, knowing what to communicate, right? How to communicate it. And I think that's something that we see as a skill again and again, that a lot of us as community folks still have to learn. And there's more work going into actually getting that data and being, learning how to communicate that data. And it's becoming as much of a job as is running the community, right? Because you all of a sudden need to dig in and understand which teams you're talking to, which KPIs you're trying to support. So I'm glad you're mentioning that as one of the potential misalignments, something that we should look out for. I would love to chat about one thing that I feel like maybe the biggest fear of any community builder out there looking to work with go-to-market teams more or starting to work with go-to-market teams, which is worrying about the community's safe space and authenticity. I think that's one of the things that why initially community folks might be hesitant to work directly with marketing, directly with sales, right? They want their community to be this authentic place where I always say, keep the promise of you joining a community, getting a resource, connecting with fellow members, connecting with fellow customers, or, connecting with someone from the industry. And now we need to figure out a way to work with these other teams. So, Lindsay, what have you recommended or done before to assure that this doesn't happen? That we don't lose that authenticity as community builders in our groups.
Yeah. I think back to 2000, I'm going far back here, 15, 16, 17, when customer success teams were all the rage, maybe like community strategy is right now. It's new. What does it mean? Does my company need it? Like, how do I even start it? Is it right for what I'm building? And it became super popular, and all of a sudden you see large organizations have these customer success teams. And customer success at the beginning, I think, was community strategy. It just wasn't, it wasn't at the forefront of our minds to put the words to it. And but then what happened with customer success is they started automating as much as they could, which took away the community component of the work that the customer success leaders were doing, which was talking to customers, understanding their pain points, iterating on the product. And then it got so automated that it became a team that almost no longer really exists inside orgs today. There might be one or two members, but it's more account based versus success based. And so just making sure that you automate your processes. There's so much that you can automate in a community strategy, but don't automate your relationships. Don't automate your surveys. Don't create surveys. And I feel like I'm telling everyone here what to do. I would recommend you not create surveys that are simply a validation of ideas or assumptions that you're making. Create surveys, create interviews where you're asking validating questions to understand what the next iteration of what you're growing is. So there's a human touch element here that simply can't go away. And if it does, then I don't know what's going to happen to what you're building. But empowering members is another really good way, to Blue's point. Creating those micro communities, because they already trust you, they already love you, they already have faith in what you're building, and that's free marketing. You don't have to pay for that marketing manager out there in San Francisco. Like, let them go, let them get out there, set them up for success, make sure that the barrier of entry for them to get the next interested customer to you is very low lift, because they're volunteers, they're busy, but set them up for success. Don't forget about them, and iterate on what they're creating in their markets just as much as you're iterating on your product. Let's see, I don't want to take anything away from anyone else, but yeah, I'll stop there.
I think you covered a great point. And we see in the chat, Jay posted, say that again, Lindsay. So I think our listeners agree with you as well. Blue, how can you make sure that that authenticity of the community doesn't, that we don't break the trust of our members? And have you dealt with that before? And how have you navigated that situation?
Yeah, again, I think I'm in a very unique position where like the entire company understands the value of community and really rallies around what is best for the community. But I still have to be a very loud, vocal voice about everything we do should be about delivering value to our members. It shouldn't be, let's not think about what we want to build or what is best for us, or what we're excited about, or is going to increase revenue or whatever it is. If we build for providing value to the customer or to the member, we're going to be building the right things. There hasn't been too many times where I've had to kind of continue to reiterate that, but everything we do now, the culture here has revolved around what is best for the contributors, our members. How do we build in addition to everything we have that they want, right? Like, what are the new things that they want? even our meetups program, that all spawned because people wanted the connection. It's a huge investment. If you've ever planned an event, you know the time and effort that goes into it. You know, we're hosting hundreds of these events around the world. To Lindsay's point about empowering the community, we've gotten to a point now that we can empower our members to host their own meetups, and bring a little bit of that magic that our community managers are bringing in certain key cities around the world. They're able to bring that to their communities, even if it is a small village in France. You're still able to share a little bit of that magic by empowering them, giving them the tools, and allowing them to bring those meetups to their cities. But yeah, we lead with value to the members, and everything we build just revolves around that, and that just keeps it a safe place, and everything we've promised to them.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. And Gareth, over to you. Any tips for us on making sure we don't lose that magic. We don't break those relationships that we have built with our community members once we start collaborating with teams that are more, metrics oriented.
Yeah, I think where I've seen that kind of issue happen the most is when that community kind of starts to scale, and just the pure numbers of members in the community kind of increases. That once kind of safe space kind of place begins to go. Like if you think about some of the communities you're part of, it's often kind of the smaller communities who are not only kind of most valuable, where you actually kind of see the most conversation. I am, certainly, there's communities which have like a couple of hundred members, which are far kind of busier than those with even with like 40, 50,000 members. And so part of kind of tackling that is to actually kind of, as your community kind of grows, is to try and subdivide it and kind of break it down and keep it into these kind of micro communities. So I'm reminded of example of from DBT Labs, where they had gone from a few hundred members to over 100,000 members on their Slack instance in just kind of a few years. And so the approach that they kind of took to tackling that was to actually increase and add additional kind of channels. And it seems kind of slightly counterintuitive because you're essentially adding complexity to this already kind of large space. But why they did it is so that they could have individual channels for kind of interests, kind of location, seniority, that kind of thing. So when a member joined and they would introduce themselves, they would use that information to direct them to the individual micro communities that they should be part of. To say that, oh, I can see you're from the Bay Area. Great, we have a meetup later this month. Go join that. If they said, oh, I mentioned anything to do with being a parent, they would kind of show them that channel. And pick up and you have to a team lead and show them this like data leadership kind of channel. And so their kind of approach was to kind of break down this a very kind of large community, which you can keep on top of all the content, and subdivide it into kind of much smaller ones. And I think that is a way that you can kind of keep that sense of intimacy and that kind of authenticity, even as you kind of scale up and numbers increase and that kind of thing.
I really like that idea, and I think you always have to kind of like when things get too big, and you always have to kind of go back and like break them down into something manageable, right? And then you kind of like create, like you said, micro environments, and then it's easier to understand them, control them, protect them, and work with them, right? As you go, as you scale. And I think it also helps keep that feeling of belonging for those members as well, right? Not just when we look at like numbers and working with other teams, but also for the community members themselves. Amazing. I know we're almost at time. I have very quick fire questions for the three of you from our audience. And Gareth, I would love to start with you. Our question came from Jay, and the question was, how do you measure community qualified leads? I think that's a great one on this topic. What would be your answer? Sorry, Gareth.
Okay, yeah, great. Yes, it is. How do you measure community
qualified leads?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it ultimately depends on the kind of what your kind of outcomes are. But typically, you'll be where that you can assign that individual landed in community kind of first before the kind of being engaged in the rest of with the rest of your organization. So one of the kind of key requirements there is that your community platform is connected to your kind of CRM, so that you can actually kind of have that kind of attribution, which is, I think, one of the kind of the biggest mistakes that I kind of see in putting in place attempts to measure community qualified leads, is that they don't have that kind of direct connection into the rest of the kind of the organization. Often that integration is treated like as like a nice to have, as something that you all will get to it. And I think it has to almost be kind of a prerequisite that you put in place before you kind of even start. Yeah, because otherwise then you get into these kind of issues where multiple kind of teams are claiming kind of that attribution of that impact. And so, yeah, that's where I think I can start in terms of, yeah, kind of setting up a qualified leads.
Yeah. Absolutely, and that's great advice and great like first action to take. And as you know, as someone on the talk-based team, that's music to our ears, right? Connecting your tech stack and making sure you measure it all together. Amazing. Another question I had here, I would love to ask Blue. This question is from Jonah. I hope I'm pronouncing their name correctly. And the question is, how can community leaders effectively balance fostering engagement along with aligning those community business initiatives, right? How can you kind of make sure that you're doing kind of the fun things for community, from what I understand from the question, versus like doing some of the more strategic stuff, and what should that balance look like?
That for me, those play in the same sandbox. I think the fun, exciting stuff should always have a goal tied to it, should be able to move the needle in some way. And the more of the fun, creative stuff that you could do that is successful, ramp that up, right? But for us, it's making sure that everything has a clear KPI, or what is the end goal of it? What is the needle we're trying to move for that program? Whether, for us, we run photo challenges every month. That moves a certain needle. We do our meetups every month. That moves a different needle. We have localized Instagram accounts. Like that's kind of at the top of the funnel for acquisition and a little bit of engagement as well. But, so everything has its own goals, and figuring out, I hate to keep saying prioritizing, but like prioritizing which one is the one that you want to focus on. And but I think they should all be fun. I just think that if you can reinvent the wheel, reimagine something, package it differently, like that's what's going to keep the community engaged and excited. If you're just doing the same thing, or quote unquote the boring stuff, just because that's like what we've been taught to do, your community is going to burn out on it, right? Like you have to give them a new look. You got to give them something fresh. Keep that engagement going, and hopefully that's also aligned with the KPIs. It's a little hard to find it, but once you find that playbook and you can execute on it time and time again, it's rinse and repeat, and just coming up with the
Yeah.
new fresh ideas for that model that you've built.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you said that and that you have that mindset, because it shouldn't be that you do a fun activity for your community and then you sneak a sales pitch in between, right? It should be aligned. And that's our role, to be kind of the gatekeepers of our communities, and making sure that the content and things we do are aligned with what our members are expecting and what the business needs as well, right? It shouldn't be either or. Speaking of content, I have a last question I would love to ask Lindsay. Lindsay, we got a question in the chat from Ryan, and the question is, what types of content have you seen work well to support go-to-market and increase in engagement in community, right? So what types of content can we kind of create that really helps us on both areas, kind of like Blue mentioned, where we can then see those leads coming in or being attributed, and etc.
Really good question. So, what I've seen work well early stage go to market is compelling and authentic storytelling from the leadership team and the operating team of the organization. Really digging deep as to why this thing was built, why they're the right people to lead it, and building in public and sharing as much as you feel comfortable sharing about why this is here, why it's a good fit to, like be in the cadence of your everyday life. And so just being as transparent as possible, but also then when you start talking to your audience, whether that be the first 20, the first 100, the first 150, there's content in every single one of those conversations. And people love or hate note takers, but bring one with you if you can, because it's really, really helpful in identifying trends. As soon as a potential customer says something 3 times, I'm like, content, done, ding, put it out there. The result is always great, whether it be in Slack or LinkedIn. And so there's content everywhere. Just take it from the conversations you're having, either create an FAQ, create a resource hub, what have you, but content lives there in a really, really powerful way. Content lives in this call just like it does in other workshops. And so really paying attention to what's resonating in discussions and what's coming up time and time again, and then generating content from that. It's classic, classic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. I'm so glad we got to ask a few more audience questions. I know we're a little over time, but I wanted to make sure that we answer at least a couple. And that's a wrap for today. I wish we could answer more, but hopefully next time. I love that we started our conversation today with, I think, almost all of us saying we could talk about this for hours, and I think that's usually the case. Let's continue the conversation in our community. In case you are on our event today, or you're watching a recap, the link to our community is shared in the chat and will be in this video as well. Lindsay, Blue, and Gareth, thank you all so much for joining us, for sharing your knowledge, for sharing your experience, real life examples with us, your point of view, as well as what worked and what didn't. I think that's the best kind of advice that you can get as a listener, as an audience. So we appreciate your time, and thank you again, huge thank you to our audience for joining us today. We hope this was helpful, and we cannot wait to share the recording with you as well as our recap, and hope to see you in our community. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.